All right. I wanted to begin by asking whether textile was the starting point, and then sort of spiraled out from there to encompass all the things that you inventoried in your introduction, or was the starting point something else?
That's a good question. I think pattern is probably the starting point before this film goes back, and then fabric was the second point on our Google Map router. And because I'd already made a bunch of films with textiles, and actually something that's not a subject of the film but a vehicle for it, the other thing is cinema. Because I had already made a bunch of films with textiles that I owned, and then I was doing a lot of traveling, specifically to attend film festivals, and have sort of a nervous energy and need to keep moving while traveling. So started working with textiles in different places. As I started doing the traveling, I started trying to speak other languages to people and thinking about phonemes. And I started listening to music everywhere and just hearing Drake everywhere I went. Even places with really beautiful musical culture. So I was just feeling this. It was kind of a building, if you will, in that order.
Yeah. Could you talk about the music? The process of coming up with it. I'm also interested, in the rhythm of the piece, whether you were kind of composing it to match the music or vice versa.
Sure. Some more great questions. Thank you. Well, I knew that I wanted the piece to be a musical. Now, I don't think it should have been a musical, but it is. And I wanted to, I've made some musicals before. I've done some appropriations of albums and some original musicals, and there's a lot of rhythmic attention in a lot of my animations. And I was thinking again about this idea of dumbing down really complex, beautiful things into 4/4 time signature regular pop music. So I knew I wanted to attack pop music with this particular film. It was a very different film at many points. There were words, there was a fake narrator, there were different types of essay structures and some of the things, and then I sort of decided that I wanted to make the music specifically with sounds that could have been diegetic within the space, so sewing machines, birds, things like that, and then also pieces of what's called the International Phonetic Alphabet, which is every phoneme that's possible with the human voice, and different linguists map it out to different languages. Because I just wanted to allow these otherwise utilitarian elements to become formal, if you will, so to make the music like that. And I understood that I wanted to have a sort of song or like travel and reflection structure throughout the piece, and that the piece would be structured like a pattern, moving in between song and space and song and space, and that I would try to really kind of upset some of the regular structures of boring 4/4 pop music by working with different time signatures. So if some of the songs feel a little bit off to you, it's because they are in irregular time signatures that you're not used to hearing. Turns out mostly like math metal is an 11 time signature, plus that Burt Bacharach Say a Little Prayer for You, right? There's a part of the verse is an 11, and Hey Ya. But it's not in real 11. It's something that happens over 8 bars. Like after 8 bars, you realize you've actually been in 11/8 or something like that. I don't really understand music, so I had that roadblock. Moving ahead with it. Does any of that answer your question?
Yes. I mean, I don't understand music either, so that was great. Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, this is your longest work to date. So I'd be curious to know sort of how you thought through kind of the these parameters of the larger canvas, and if you always had this runtime in mind, and how that kind of informs the structure.
Sure. Well, there was no logic or rhyme or reason or controlled method of making this film at all at any point in the production. Even now, I'm still shooting. Actually, I didn't tell you guys that. It's not really done. No, I'm just kidding. It really is, but I'm still shooting. The piece was huge. Originally, I thought it would be like 2 hours, an hour and a half. Then, I've said this before, this film really suffered from applying for grants, if that's possible, because I feel like a lot of grant applications need you to act like you know what you're doing and pretend like your film has characters and like a reason to exist in the world. And, making up those lies really put me on the wrong trajectory a lot of the time, because I kind of lost the sense of where I was going. So there were many versions. As I said before, there were songs with words. There was a part where there was like interviews with the textiles, interviewing them about what they thought, and they had all the same problems that we did, and it's weird reflexive thing. But ultimately I decided on 60 minutes in the end, because it's the longest length of film you could put on one 16mm reel. And 2, there's a reason for that, right? Because an hour is this amount of time that we've decided upon, that relates to like the way we structure our days, 24 hours in a day, 24 frames per second, rotations, looms, the whole nine. And actually at that point I thought that was going to be short. But yeah, I don't know. It's an hour now. I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for that.
No, I mean, it's an hour.
Yeah, it's an hour.
Yeah. I want to ask one more question, then maybe we can open it up to the audience. I just forgot what it was. Oh yeah, okay. So I think even more so in this, for me at least, in this film versus some of your previous work, you really sense the tension between animation and photography. So I was just curious if you had any thoughts on the work status, kind of in between these two mediums. And I think it's especially striking at the end of the film when you incorporate what I assume is like the sound of the shutter on the camera on the animation bench as a kind of bearing of the device late in the game.
Sure, that's a great question. And I felt like it was a really special, this film was a very special reason to actually work in animation for many reasons. A lot of my stuff is very much like the end part of the film where you're very close up and you're in one room. And part of my impulse in making this film was to get out of that room and talk to people, meet people. But essentially, watching Erica Beckman's films earlier, I was reminded that photography and the ability to superimpose things kind of picks up where cubism leaves off, from being able to see one object from all sides. And I think a lot about how animation can do that in a temporal sense. So part of my goals around structuring the piece were to be in sort of like an every place, and have these sort of flicker films going on within larger scapes, which were of course real spaces. These were the first times that I was really dealing with such real spaces. And as a result, a lot of the images to me that I came back, even though they were animated, they were codified to me in the wrong way, like as educational films or documentary vibes or things like that. So I really worked to find this, a balance between going close up and having a real scene in the film, to think about the point of animation. A lot of the systems of knowledge that I believe are addressed in this film, like mapping, language, perspective, musical technology, they're all remnants of humans needing to make systems to figure out the world, right? And it's interesting to be an independent animator in a sort of industrial mode, and it fascinates me that people would go so far to simply represent reality again. You know what I mean? So I felt like this was a beautiful opportunity to really make a new reason to have something animated, again, to try and get this sort of like multitude of perspectives, as opposed to trying to put something in sequence. To me, like, sequence is being didactic to a certain sense, because like I'm showing you the truth. This is a form of truth. I don't know.
Yeah.
If that makes sense to you guys. It's been a long 5 years.
All right, let's take some questions from the audience. Just raise your hand and please wait for the microphone, which we will bring you so that everyone can hear. Let's start right here.
Love the film. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I noticed that you used the Skype ringtone in one section, and there are kind of implications of global connectivity as well as kind of a global homogeneity in terms of the free market and whatnot. What was your inspiration for using the Skype ringtone?
Such a great question. Did everyone hear that? Because the microphone's a little...
Yeah. If Ted, Ted, you noticed his mic was going out? All right, well, did everyone hear? All right.
He asked me why I chose to use the Skype ringtone. Do 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 do. If you don't know it, because not everyone does. Sometimes, to me, it's a household name. But such a great question. As we've said before, this was a musical, and I always wanted it to be a musical. But it was important to me to have it sort of be like generic yet original. But there was also all of these urges within me to use real songs, because that's how contemporary pop music works, right? We hook you with a really great part of another song. And that can really work towards a great argument surrounding exchange and appropriation and this and that. But I couldn't pick my songs. I wanted to use America from West Side Story. I wanted to use Fantastic Voyage. I wanted to have a little tip of the hat to Pink Floyd, like We Don't Need No Education, and the library part. We were going to have everything. But eventually I just decided to not go that route, but to include the Skype, because one part that was really missing on a visual level for me was my telephone. How I was using it for mapping, how I was using it to communicate with people on WhatsApp, how I was using it to research where I was going, and all the noises it was making, how I was using it to show people what I was doing on the road, you know? And thinking about the phone and this whole idea of sort of a contemporary notion of identity, how we're branding ourselves, how we can communicate so easily, yet it seems we have little to say. I decided to fuse the Skype song with this selection of mirrors, right? To again address this idea of identity through technology, but also this sort of reflexive feedback chamber that I was sensing around many of the issues surrounding the piece. Like, tourism's horrible, / people need this money for their economy, you know, sort of thing. Or like, this is cultural appropriation, this is cultural appreciation, this sort, you know. College is great if you can afford it. Microphone? Hi. Is that an answer? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's go in the back. Let's go in the back, and if the microphone does not work, I'm afraid you'll have to shout.
Is it working? No.
I have a small question, but first I want to congratulate you on making a film that actually has restraint in terms of trying to entertain us too much. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I hear your ideas going in a million directions, but for me this film was really, besides the patterns, it was really about how these textiles are moving around the world. They had a will of their own. They took boats, they took planes, they are like in constant motion all through the world, so that was the strongest piece that I got from it. And of course the constant presence of the ocean was what really made that happen from that second shot, in fact, where we see all the textiles and just the ocean and waves popping up. But the first shot is like ocean. You know what I mean?
Why is it there? How does it have anything to do with anything? You know, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with it, which was so freeing. You know, like trying to stay on this grid, working all the time. Okay, the backstory to it is that there are several sections that include all of these fabric samples with grid blocks of the little pieces of fabric. And at one point, I made cities, fake cardboard cities, out of all of these samples. And I shot a lot of scenes of these cities like building up. I was like, here's the birth of civilization. Now civilization is reproducing. Again, but those were all really lame, you know, and I had them all in my house, and I was like, ugh, can we burn them? We shot them with my next door neighbor, Farmer Mike, who drove us up to the top of his hill, and we shot them. And then I just had this beautiful footage, and I was like, this has no place in here. Except if I put it at the very beginning, because the way that I made the narrative in my own head was that there was a disaster, and all of these textiles were displaced. And then they start their journey, and they start taking the boats, and they start riding on the trains, you know. But also, yeah, I just thought it was really powerful, you know. You know what I'm saying? Or just be fired the whole time. Thank you for that question. Thank you.
All right. Let's go right here. Yeah.
Do you want to use my mic?
Oh,
right
sure,
here?
sure. Thank you very much for your film and for being here. My question is just about the pace of it. For like so much of it, it's like really like relentless and at you the whole time. And I was hoping you could just discuss your development of like sequencing language in it.
Sure. Thank you so much. I agree. The film is totally relentless, and it doesn't stop. I tried to find pause in the moments between, but I think something that I really ran up against here is that I wanted to flirt with ideas of the music video. I wanted to flirt with ideas of musical syncresis or musical synchronization and these sort of Mickey Mouse phenomenons where you think that it's in beat, but it's not, and how we move from meticulously timing things out by hand to computer algorithms making music sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, my honest answer is that like I don't know how to do anything. The fire was the best I got with the slow motion. I was like, this is really calming. But what is funny to me is that in the frame within frame shots with everything going on in the background, and the flickering textile, those to me are more abrasive and aggressive than just the close-up flicker stuff. It's like almost like I made a development where I made that stuff seem serene, which is, it's so not, you know what I'm saying? But to me, the reason that it's so ebullient or effervescent in some ways is because I think in a certain sense, one of my goals is to sort of like reveal energy and reveal life as an animator, right? One who brings life to. And I'm still someone who's really inspired by someone like Len Lai, who was really interested in the idea of kinetic energy. Yes. So, and I feel that that's got to be a very sort of like manic, constantly vibrating thing that we can't see. You know what I mean? Does that answer your question? Okay, thank you.
All right, and we have time for one more. Let's go right there. Him. Yeah.
Well, first, I just want to say I'm your biggest fan, and I can't keep calm.
We called on the right guy.
Second, I have two questions, if that's okay. One is, it seems like water is an important motif or sub-theme, and I was curious if you could talk about that. And then the second question is, if you could speak on your commentary of the global economy when it seems like your disposition in the global economy made the film possible.
I should probably repeat his two questions so that everyone can hear him for the recording. One was about the motif of water in the work, and the second question was about the global economy, and I caught the last twist in the question, but I think you got it. Right?
I got it.
If you could also say in the mic that I'm the biggest fan.
No.
Did you get the $5 that I sent you?
That question was from her biggest fan. All right.
The water, There's actually, I was thinking about all elements. I don't know if there's more water than other types of elements or like ways to travel, but I was interested in depicting the textiles traveling by water, by land, and by air. Are there other ways to travel? And virtually, because I feel like that's what the internet sort of steps in. So like photography steps in where cubism leaves off, and then the internet steps in where cinema leaves off to take you somewhere virtually without having to actually move. You know what I'm saying? So is that, we're good on the water?
So it's just an element of multiple elements.
Yeah.
The others?
No, I felt like they were a group.
Cool.
I had like groups of motifs in my heart. And the next question, I pretty much got what you were saying, is that like I'm critical of a system in which I am complicit.
Yes.
Yes, so true. And yeah, I mean, I feel like that was one of the reasons that I decided not to take an actual position in words with this film, because it's like, A, what do I have to say? B, who am I talking to? I hit a real brick wall with this film as far as like what experimental film can do. And found myself, you know, it's like, I'm a teacher, right? You know that because you were my student, which is why you're my biggest fan. But it's like, I feel like I was very naive when I was 18 years old. And I was like, I want to be an experimental filmmaker, and I want to be a professor, and I'm going to be able to bypass all this like consumerism and anything bad in the world. I'm going to go and be a super radical. And then like fast forward 20 years, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm literally in a private university alumni club, like romper room for white affluence, as an experimental filmmaker and a teacher. And I feel like we've really hit this big impasse. We've hit a brick wall together where I see art eating itself in a way. And it's like I could preach about what I thought all day long. You know, this is also a reason that I chose not to name any origins of any textiles, because I started researching them and just thinking like, well, who wrote these books? This is obviously a position of privilege, citing this, making this nomenclature towards gaining their own versions of like cultural capital or upward mobility and things like that. So I basically just started questioning all of knowledge and all of language and just started using different words for things because nothing seemed like the truth anymore. But I feel like that's got to be everyone in the world's split position on it. It's like, I'm really critical of this, and I'm also stuck in this. This very room that I dreamed of having this film in, is Lincoln Center do we not knock down low-income housing to build Lincoln Center? We did. So this is what we're swimming in, right? So yeah, is that an answer?
You just referenced water, too.
Hey, cool.
All right, mission accomplished.
Okay.
We got to go.
All
Thank
right.
you, Jodie.
Thank you guys
all
so
of you.
much.